What is up, guys? Welcome to my ranking of all of the Conjuring films, and as we go on, this is going to be looked back on as the video that is the ranking of Phase 1 of the Conjuring Universe. Whatever that means, I guess we'll find out in the future. But as of right now, there are 10 movies in the Conjuring universe, starting with The Conjuring and ending with this weekend's new release, The Conjuring Last Rites, which is apparently kicking major ass at the box office. So needless to say, we are far from done talking about this franchise. If you guys are a massive fan of the Conjuring universe, let me know not only your favorite films down below, but name your most favorite entity. What is the ghost or the demon or the apparition that you like the most, and is it one that has not gotten their own movie yet? Let's talk about the Conjuring universe and what you want for Phase 2 to look like down in the comment section below. And while it's not going to include the most recent edition of The Conjuring: The Last Rites, if you guys enjoy this franchise as well as a similar franchise by James Wan, Insidious, I did a tier list last year where I faced off those two franchises, so check that out if you want. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and kick this thing off with number 10, my least favorite film in the Conjuring universe so far. And if I'm being honest, there's 3 movies in this list that could pretty much tie for bottom. Depending on what day of the week you ask me, my answer might change. But as of the recording of this video, my number 10 is going to be The Curse of La Llorona. Now, the interesting thing about this movie is that it's kind of an unofficial addition to this universe. It is a movie that has a character that I believe was in Annabelle, or maybe The Nun. He also has Annabelle in the movie, or there's a picture of Annabelle. It's got very direct references to the universe, as well as the guy that made this film is the one that went on to direct The Conjuring 3 and 4, as well as The Nun 2. So it's more difficult to try to explain why this isn't a Conjuring Universe film than it is to just accept that it is. But the producers have been very weird about it. Nonetheless, the movie itself is extremely forgettable, extremely generic, by the numbers, run-of-the-mill haunted house movie. The La Llorona entity, I think, has potential to be a creepy entity, but we don't really get to realize that potential here. There is a couple of memorable little jump scares. I always remember the one where you have Linda Cardellini looking in the bedroom at her daughter, and as the door shuts, you start to see the La Llorona ghost in there with her, which was a pretty effective jump scare. I do think that Linda Cardellini herself adds a little bit of appeal to this because I've always loved her as an actress. You get Tuco in here at one point, and for those of us Breaking Bad whores, that's never a bad thing. But beyond that, this is a movie that I can never remember a single detail of its story, a single plot point, a single character name, and just aside from a couple of quick images that I can remember in my head of a couple of these characters' looks and that one jump scene that I just described, the rest of it, I might as well have never even seen this movie before. So you end up with a movie that is so forgettable that many people forget to even include it in the list of Conjuring films. Well, if you're stuck in a house that's haunted by a bunch of demonic entities, I hope you've stocked up on a bunch of delicious meals from a sponsor of today's video, Factor. Summertime is over and school schedules are back in full force, but that doesn't mean you have to take your foot off the gas with your wellness goals. Between the gym, creating content, and being a full-time dad and husband, I often find there's not enough time left in the day, and one of the first casualties is almost always meal prep. Well, Factor gives you the flexibility to stay active without succumbing to quick cheat meals anytime you're short on time. Factor's ready-to-eat meal delivery service takes the stress out of meal planning and sets you up for success by letting you skip the grocery store, the prep, and especially the cleanup, and enjoy chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals all delivered right to your door and ready in just 2 minutes. Factor has recently doubled the size of their menu to now offer over 80 weekly rotating meals. So now there are 3 times the new weekly meals, 2 times more seafood meals, and 2 times high-protein meals. And there's even an option now to customize your meals by swapping out the protein at no additional charge. If you absolutely love chicken and you're not really a fan of pork chops, just make that swap for free. I enjoy Factor nearly every single week, and you will too. So head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code Cody Leach FB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. That's code Cody Leach FB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. And thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Coming in at number 9, we have the original Nun. Now, this was a movie that had a ton of hype behind it because Valak was an absolute standout in The Conjuring 2, which was a massively successful movie. When we found out that The Nun was going to be getting its own movie, it was like, hell yes, this is going to be absolutely terrifying. And you watch it, and it's the most generic haunted house, but in a castle type movie. It literally I can describe it as almost like a funhouse ride where you just lock into this little car that's on a rail and you just go through all these little haunted corridors in an old time castle. And it's just things jumping out at you, noises coming out, things coming in front of the frame of the camera out of nowhere. That's pretty much the experience of this film over and over and over again until the end. Now, it's led by Taissa Farmiga, who I really enjoy as an actress, but there's also kind of a weird element to her being here in the fact that she looks so much like her sister, Vera Farmiga, that it always felt like some kind of stunt casting where the stunt never actually paid off. Like why she wasn't Lorraine Warren herself or Lorraine Warren's mother or some kind of a lineage there. It just felt kind of distracting to have her there and not have that very obvious tie, especially with this movie being introduced by Vera Farmiga, and then it kind of like bleeds right into a scene with Taissa. So that was always kind of a puzzling decision for me, but nonetheless, I love her as an actress, so she's good to have here. And I do think that there is a couple of creepy images here. Like Valak is a very effective entity. There's a reason why it was so popular, but it's just a movie that, like La Llorona, doesn't have any meat on its bones. There's no story or plot or interesting details in here that I can latch onto and remember. I just remember a couple of quick images. And the fact that the movie ends with the climax that is totally ripped from Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight is also frustrating as a horror fan. That was something that I've seen a lot of people call out over the years, rightfully. So The Nun is another film that I just don't really have any use for. You know, I can get jump scared by playing Five Nights at Freddy's or something like that, if that's what I'm looking for. I don't need to sit down for 90 minutes and wait for you to do it once or twice. And coming in at number 8 is the original Annabelle. Now, this one's kind of a little complicated for me because while I am saying definitively that it's in competition for bottom of this list, there's also something about this movie that I've always felt was a little bit overhated. Like, there's a number of people that agree The Nun was disappointing and La Llorona is pretty a nothing burger. But Annabelle, since the day it came out, has always been hailed as like one of the absolute worst pieces of trash that has ever hailed the theatrical screen. It's not good, but I never thought that it merited a level of hate. So I don't know. I'm kind of contradictory in the way that I have this on this list, but Annabelle, not a good movie. Also not the worst thing that I've ever seen, nor is The Nun or La Llorona for that matter. But this is a film that was immediately after the first Conjuring, which just obviously blew the doors off. Everybody loved The Conjuring for the most part. Huge success. And now we're going to start this universe. And Annabelle was a standout image and character, even though it was just very brief in The Conjuring. So there was so much potential here. And much like The Nun and La Llorona, it's going to be like beating a dead horse. It's a very generic haunted house film. It is very run-of-the-mill cliche in its approach. Now, I do think that there are a number of very effective jump scares in this movie, which is why I have it above the other two pretty definitively. And even some days it might be in my number 7 for that. I love the jump scare where the little girl's running at the doors, it's closing, and then a grown-ass woman plows through it. I like the one where they frame the shot where somebody's asleep on the couch next to a baby and a woman in the background walks through a door frame and then all of a sudden is like right in the forefront of the shot as she comes this way. There's some pretty decent camera work in here as far as crafting and executing scares that I don't think this movie gets enough credit for. Now, beyond that, the story of just a pregnant woman stuck at home and some weird shit starts to happen, it is so like they just took a script off of a desk and just threw Annabelle in there and just churned it out. So it's not a great film. What I will also say is that the existence of Annabelle creation and as a prequel, like looping things back around to the events of Annabelle, I do think makes this movie slightly better. Very similar to like Ouija Origin of Evil. It makes Ouija a little more tolerable as a film because the prequel was so good. So Annabelle, not a movie I'd ever watch again, not a movie I would suggest to anybody, or certainly a movie I would die on a hill defending, but not the absolute irredeemable trash that a lot of people say that it is, but still among the worst of this franchise for sure. Coming at number 7 for me is going to be The Nun 2. And now that I'm looking at my list, it probably would have been a more accurate description to say my bottom 4 are interchangeable, because I really do have like a chunk of movies that just do nothing for me, a chunk of movies that I think are fine, and then a chunk of movies that I think are awesome. So this is the last entry in the it does nothing for me category. The Nun 2 had a lot of potential to learn lessons from the criticisms of the first film, and I think they do a little bit better of a job, but it's not a substantial growth. This is the same director who gave us La Llorona, as well as a movie we're going to talk about soon, Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. So this was his third entry into this franchise. And I just don't think that this director is very good at crafting scares, because aside from just the inherently creepy image of Valak, there's not really any memorable jumps or memorable camera work or lighting effects or anything that really sticks in your mind with The Nun 2. At best, the one where the little girl is looking through the crawl space and she's shining the flashlight and you get like a brief little glimpse of Valak. Like, that's the creepiest image in the movie to me, and that one's pretty tame by standards that are set by this actual franchise. The story itself, revisiting Taissa Farmiga's character and also the character of Frenchie, there's a bit of interest there in having different characters and attacking the story from different perspectives that at least makes the runtime more tolerable than The Nun, where it just felt like nothing was happening. So a little bit better storytelling here. I do think that the castle, the old setting, the old period piece setting, which is true for The Nun as well, breaks it up a little bit and makes it a little unique from just haunted houses across the US, which most of these movies kind of tend to take place in. But beyond that, it's The Nun again. It's the same bag of tricks, and the only difference here being that they try to treat it as a mystery when we know what fucking movie we just paid money to go see. So this whole thing about, I wonder what's causing all the chaos around here. I wonder what's the source of the evil. Let's spend an hour trying to figure that out. Bitch, it's Valak. We know. He's on the poster. The funny thing about this one was 2 years ago, I got really sick for like 2 months. Didn't know what was going on with me, and then just kind of like miraculously got better. And this was the first movie that I saw in theaters in over a month. Like, I was damn near bedridden. I don't know if anybody remembers that time where content slowed to a crawl. But I went to the theater to see this, and it was almost like coming out of COVID. It was like, oh, I'm back in the theater. Please be awesome. And my experience was The Nun 2. It was like, I'm going back to bed. Fuck this. Coming at number 6, we have The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And there's a decent little hike between my number 7 and my number 6. Now we're in the category of films that are just okay to me. Not super offensive, but not anything overly standout, but satisfying enough. And the biggest disappointment with this film is that this was the first Conjuring movie that was not crafted by James Wan himself, and it absolutely showed. It is a monumental decrease in quality from what I think is absolute greatness in the first two Conjurings. So it's very hard to escape that. No matter how decent some things are in this movie, there's always this stench of disappointment on it because of that. But what is interesting about this movie that I do like is that it does change up the Conjuring vibe quite a bit, where it's not just about the Warrens going to this haunted house and trying to save a family. It's a courtroom drama. You got a guy that committed a murder, says that he was possessed when he did it, and so the Warrens are brought in as like these experts, and they're trying to investigate, you know, what the hell is going on and what truth, if any, is to this guy's testimony. And by the end of the film, the source of evil actually being a human character that is just playing around with the paranormal and witchcraft and everything was an interesting little change from just having yet another demonic presence. So that is something that I do appreciate about this movie. I would also say that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are always going to lift up any movie that they are the stars of, because they're just perfect casting for these characters. So even if you had The Nun or The Nun 2, if I'm following them as characters, I'm most likely going to enjoy the movie a bit more just because of their presence, and they're just as good here as they've always been. There's a couple of interesting visuals here, going from like night to day and things like that, where they're playing around with the camera. But the other big negative with this film, which gets significantly worse in the fourth Conjuring film that we haven't talked about yet, is that they're really starting to lose the tether to reality at this point. One of the great things about The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2 is, despite having such huge paranormal swings and demons and all this other stuff that is just otherworldly, it always maintained this tether to reality where you could convince your brain every once in a while that this is a real story, these are real characters, these are real live events, which is kind of the whole pitch here, is based on true stories, the true paranormal investigations of the Warrens. And by the time you get to this third film, they just absolutely throw that out because it's so CGI'd. I mean, you got a kid like contorting into a spider and stuff, where not only is that just generic Exorcist stuff at this point, which has been done to fucking death, but when you lose that tether to reality, I think you lose what made the Conjuring films unique and special. And now it's just another demonic possession movie, which we have a whole bag of those. Most of them suck. So Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It. It's watchable. It's fine, but a steep decline from the first two Conjurings, and it lands at number 6. Coming at number 5 for me right now is going to be the new film, The Conjuring Last Rites. And as of my one watch of this new one, I do like it slightly better than The Devil Made Me Do It, just because of the family drama element. Now, I will totally understand that I actually expect that that's actually going to be a negative for most people, because your average Joe doesn't go to Conjuring movies for family drama and relationship stuff. It's about the scares and the paranormal and the demons and the new entities, and that is where this movie absolutely drops the ball. Everything in regard to the horror of the Conjuring films is about as generic and as weak as you can get in this one. I think the entities themselves are not very intimidating. In fact, they're kind of laugh-inducing sometimes. I think you're really starting to retread a lot of plot elements here by this fourth film. It's just yet again, a family's in danger. The Warrens come in. Oh my God, it's this demon. Only it's a demon that ties to their first case, which we don't even really get much of a reveal for. It's just a demon, which that in of itself kind of feels sacrilegious for The Conjuring, because the reveal of what the entity is and what he looks like and what name they're going to give them, like, that's a really cool piece that the fans look forward to. You don't get that here. It's just a haunted mirror. And if you're going to do that post Oculus, you need to do a much better job. And so everything on the horror side of this, I actually almost fell asleep a few times, which is hilarious that I was engaged in the quiet moments, and during the supposed to be tense and insane moments, I'm like, but as I said, during the family moments where you have the Warrens and their relationship with their daughter, who's a grown adult now, and her fiance, and him kind of being brought into the family and all the craziness that comes along with that. And of course, having Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga continuing to like develop the relationship between them. And they're at a point in their life where they're starting to look at retirement, and they long for the peace and quiet of not doing any more of this paranormal investigation, the demonology, and how crazy the case has to get to bring them back into it, and trying to raise the personal stakes for them, with Patrick Wilson having a bit of a heart condition, as well as their daughter having that clairvoyance that Lorraine Warren is supposed to have, and them not really wanting her to embrace it at first. I enjoyed all of that, you know, as characters that I really enjoy, despite this franchise as a whole being very extreme hit or miss for me. These are characters I'm invested in, that I really am interested in, that I enjoy watching. I will miss after I watch this fourth film, if this is in fact their last time, I'll be honest. And so all the stuff that deals with them as characters, that was the most interesting stuff to me. And to me, it stood out just a little bit more than The Devil Made Me Do It. But like the last section, you ask me in a couple of days if I rewatch these two, I might have a different answer for you, because it's not like a huge difference. Coming at number 4, we got Annabelle Comes Home. And as far as just your more stock haunted house films, I think this one has the most fun in store. So if you actually really like that type of experience that they give you a lot in the Conjuring universe, this is the one that I at least had a smile on my face through most of it. It just has a simple setup of the Warrens are going away for something. Their daughter is left there with a babysitter, and the babysitter's friend starts fucking around with their little room of evil. And so Annabelle gets out, and she brings a whole bunch of friends with her, and you get a bunch of different entities here. So it's not really very interesting on a story level. It's just a setup for a bunch of scares and tense sequences, but they're pretty effective. I mean, you got the ferryman here, which I thought was very cool. I'm surprised he hasn't got his own movie yet. You have the bride, which is very reminiscent of La Llorona. Maybe that's why they don't want La Llorona to be included, because they had more plans for the bride. And there's a werewolf in here. And then, of course, Annabelle as a character has a constant presence throughout the film. So it's very much another more generic haunted house film, but it's one that I think is done better, significantly better than some of them. And so it does have a lot more entertainment value at heart here. Coming at number 3 is Annabelle Creation. And to me, this was a monstrous improvement from the first film, where the first film just felt like it had nothing to say, no good ideas. It's just, let's put Annabelle in page 5, 23, and 74 of this generic little haunted house script. This one actually felt like they tried to craft a story and some kind of a meaningful origin here, where you have these parents that lose their daughter named Annabelle, and through certain events, they end up letting this demonic entity use the doll as a vessel, and all the crazy shit that happens with that. There's some really effective scares here. There's one where a little girl's looking out of a window and turns around as a demon face. That's really good. There's some pretty cringing kind of moments in a good way, where a guy's like holding a cross and his fingers start to get broken backwards. That, just snapping bones is always something that is going to get a reaction out of you where you're like, oh, I can feel it. And as I said earlier, they did something that is actually a very difficult task, which is you craft a story here and an origin that leads into the events of the first Annabelle that I do think makes the first Annabelle a better movie. And for a movie that was just hailed as absolute irredeemable trash, that's pretty good. So Annabelle creation, this was David F. Sandberg, who did Lights Out, went on to do the Shazam movies, and then eventually Until Dawn. I think he's a really good director here. So for all of the non-James Wan filmmakers that have taken on a chapter in the Conjuring universe, I think he is the one who's done the best job of really crafting scares, but having his own style and look to his film. So Annabelle creation, I enjoy quite a bit. This is one that I can very easily rewatch. Coming at number 2 for me is going to be The Conjuring 2. And I think both of these top 2 of the original Conjuring films are fantastic. To me, these are horror classics. These are some of the best horror films to be released in the last 15 or so years. And it's only because of how high that these 2 movies set the bar that even the tolerable movies and the ones that are pretty decent that are lower on this list, why they seem so far short of my expectations, especially the third and fourth Conjuring film. So Conjuring 2 is a movie that maybe has a bit of a bloated runtime. That's the one negative that I've always really understood with this one, but it has all the elements of the first Conjuring with a new case, but has a little bit more of a heart and an emotion to it. There's very much this romance angle in here with the love between Ed and Lorraine Warren, where she keeps seeing these visions of his death and how that plays out, just her love and protection of him. You have the 2 different families kind of blending together. Like, my favorite scene in the entire movie is in the middle of all this chaos where Ed Warren just sits everybody down, tries to bring some comfort to everybody, and just starts playing Elvis on an acoustic guitar. I love those quieter character moments in these movies. And these scares themselves are very effective here. You have a little girl and a family who's being haunted by this seemingly vengeful ghost of this old man that lives in their house, which has a ton of really good setups and executions of scares. And then eventually the reveal of Valak being the true puppet master here, which I think Valak is arguably maybe the scariest entity in the entire franchise. I don't think there's many people that would agree or that would argue that. And so this was a great introduction. Just the scene of Alex standing in the Warrens' hallway and then all of a sudden turning slowly and walking into the room is enough to like chill you to your bone. But even the scene where the shadow is going through the room and then the picture comes out is great. And there's just so much about this movie that tries to not repeat the first film, but expand on it. And I think they do a really good job, to the point where I understand anybody having a little bit of a different ranking with these top 2. And maybe if you catch me in the right mood, this would end up being my number 1. But just because it is a significantly longer feeling film and there's a lot more going on with the investigation and the cops going in and then it kind of being written off as a hoax just to come back in the third act with Valak, it's a more ambitious film that doesn't 100% reach its ambitions, but it gets damn close. So I love The Conjuring 2. It's obviously one of my favorites of this franchise, but it is one of my favorite horror films to be released in the last number of years. But number 1 for me is still where this franchise started, and that is The Conjuring. I do think that this is the best film. It's the one that I think has the best execution of the idea, of these characters, of the scares. There's just something special about the way that James Wan crafts these types of movies. I mean, you look at the basic concept of The Conjuring. Couple of paranormal investigators come into a haunted house where a family is being tormented by seemingly a ghost or a demonic entity, and there's an exorcism by the end of it. I mean, that on paper sounds like about 100 other movies that we've seen. But the way that James Wan goes about it makes it not only a unique film, but one that was so beloved and successful that it spawned this massively successful franchise that is only going to continue to grow to be an absolute juggernaut in horror history. So the way that you have these 2 characters of Ed and Lorraine Warren, as I've said, they're just great as far as the casting, and there's something really inherently interesting about them. I know there's controversy about the real life people, and I've done no research whatsoever, but as far as movie characters, they're great. And I like the way that the movie really takes its time with its setup, where you have the Warrens doing their thing, and then you also have this family who is being tormented by this witch ghost. And it really does build your concern and your investment in that family, who normally would be just like easily written off side characters, cannon fodder, to where when the Warrens finally show up, you're already fully invested in trying to help this family and help these kids, and you feel bad that anything's even happening. And the scares themselves are great, with the kids being dragged across the room and getting yanked out of their bed. The one where the ghost is on top of that armoire or whatever is an all-timer for me, as well as the hide and clap thing. Just such a brilliant concept to do such a simple scare of just having an object come out of the darkness, but it's done so well. Even though you know it's coming, it still gets you. And the ultimate third act, where you get, you know, the image of the girl, the ghost, hanging upside down, and then turns around and the feet start to follow the character underneath. I think it was Vera Farmiga's character who's crawling around. It's just a movie that never really lets up. So it's got the tension, it's got the intensity, but it's also got the heart of really good characters, and it was just well-written, even victim characters, the family that you're invested in. So this is an experience, a haunted house experience, or even a possession film that I do think is one of the best ever. And it's actually a movie that, despite it being a great theatrical experience, it was even more effective and creepy at home, which is a lasting experience, because you're going to watch it at home vast majority of the times you're watching it. So The Conjuring's a classic to me. Easily, these top two here are at the top of this list, but this one maintains my number one. Well, that's it for this one, guys. Be sure to check out Factor in the video description below. If you enjoyed this video, click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews, including the last Rites review. And up here is that tier list where Insidious faces off against The Conjuring. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.